Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday, and it's our first community gathering of 2025. Oh, my dear. And this is actually our 200, if I think I counted, this is the 244th consecutive meeting that we've done, or community gathering that we've done. These are conversations about theater and the arts. It's not always just about theater. We've done all sorts of things and kind of all sorts of conversations. I've I started doing this in 2020, April 17th, 2020, as a response to COVID because none of us knew what to do with ourselves. And I said, well, we got nothing better to do. Let's meet in a Zoom room and talk. So we've been doing that 244 weeks now. And thank goodness we're not in shutdown anymore. However, I've discovered many things from the lesson of transitioning into using a virtual medium. First of all, I learned that TRU, which has been a New York City small arts organization for many, many years, could actually be, dare I say it, global. We have people who come in from all over the world and all over the country. So thank you, COVID. There are some things to thank you for. Can no longer talk about us as being just New York centric, and it also expands the people that I can bring into the rooms and the conversations we can have. I do conversations because I don't know what else to do about a world that troubles me. So at least sitting around and talking to people about things that matter to me and hopefully matter to you um, is healing in some ways and informative and maybe inspiring sometimes. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm planning on keeping on doing it. Something that started because of shutdown is going to continue to be part of my life and TRU's life for who knows how long. Um, Forever? Who knows? So today I'm doing I have a series that I've been doing over the past 4 years. I call it a series because something has a similar theme. I know a lot of people in theater who multitask. Theater is one of the most multitasking businesses on this earth, probably. We've had Austin Pendleton, we've had Joanna Gleason, we've had Richard Maltby, we've had um, other people as well. And today I'm going to bring on somebody who um, I've admired for many, many years. I've known for a long time. And I do want to actually brag about the fact that she's one of the few people in cabaret who has actually sung something that I've written. So I'm very grateful to her. I'm very grateful to her indeed. I'm going to bring her in. You're going to meet Jamie deRoy in just a moment. Uh,
Oh
Jamie,
my God,
welcome to True.
that's a lot of my office. Holy shit.
Well, um, I'm going to add my. It's going to be a little smaller now because I'm going to be here now. So, Jamie, I knew you originally. You were cabaret. You were New York cabaret. You still are.
No,
But
I wouldn't say anymore, but I mean, that's definitely where I started and didn't really think I'd particularly get out of it ever. I have to say though, and on your wonderful song, uh, I gave it to somebody, another performer, with your permission, because I told you I thought it was so funny, but that it really required a really good soprano voice. I mean, a really good voice, which I didn't have, and I thought it deserved better than me. And it had many lives, I think, because of sharing it with some really good sopranos.
okay. But there was another song of mine, my Sondheim parody, "Take Off My
Oh
Gown."
well, that I love, and I still would do. But I will tell you a funny story about singing that. I I was once invited for Christmas to Arlene Dahl's house for Christmas. And it was just, upstate, I mean, or Westchester somewhere, I don't know. It was not in New York City. It was beautiful, and it was Christmas, and somebody's sitting around the piano and playing, and they said, sing something. And I said, well, I don't really do any songs that anyone would really know. It's all special material, but but I mean, I guess I could do a parody that a friend of mine wrote. And they said, yeah, 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 do it. So I started to sing Take Off My Gown. And Elaine Stritch is sitting or standing near me. And she goes, stop, stop. He hates parodies of his songs. And I'm like, is he here? I mean, what difference does it make that I am singing this song way away from New York? Anyway, she wouldn't let me finish it.
May I just say I had his permission? I had his permission with that one. I did two
I
parodies.
know, and I told her that, but she said, ah, he doesn't like people singing parodies. I was like, well, he knows about this one.
I'll tell you about me and Elaine Stritch someday.
Okay.
That's a story. So let's talk about how did you? I don't even know your deep history. I don't even know how you got into cabaret and how you started becoming a cabaret performer and how you also developed a persona. Um,
Well, I think everything in my life seems to have been done by accident. Um, I I had a friend that I met just really kind of randomly at the Museum of Modern Art, watching a screening, and he liked my laugh. And we just started talking, and he befriended me. And he would take me to a lot of places. He had a car in a convertible, and not that many people in my early days of New York did I know that even had a car. I remember driving around New York with him once, and there was this four four drawer file cabinet on the street. And I said, boy, that's nice. And he goes, do you need it? And I went, well, yeah, but how the hell am I going to get it home? And he said, well, put it in the back seat of my car. And that was my first experience with getting furniture off the street, which nowadays I'm told, that you can pick something up and they give you a damn ticket for it because it's the property at that point of the it's the sanitation department, which is like so.
I furnished my first apartment from the street.
I there
What are you telling
somebody
me?
wrote a song of I furnished a one-room apartment.
Yeah, that was actually from Martin Charnin review. What was it called? Because I had a song. I had two songs in that. In fact, I had the Baker's Daughter in that, Buns,
Oh yeah,
which I
the one
think.
that was down at it was upstairs at oh my God, I
Yeah, it was
love
upstairs at something. Upstairs, it wasn't upstairs at the
it's a
Duke. It was
restaurant
O'Neill's.
that doesn't exist anymore.
yeah.
Upstairs at O'Neill's.
Upstairs
Yes,
at
thank
O'Neill's. That's it.
you.
Yes, hallelujah.
That's where it was. I auditioned not my song, but Dale Gonye's song of What Makes Bobby Short. And Martin wanted to use it, but I would have had to give up singing it, which I wasn't ready to do. And he was only paying $25. So when I offered it to Dale Gonye, he said, I'd rather you kept singing it. So it didn't get in the review. But anyway, I mean, it was just so this particular guy who was a little crazy, but he was a headhunter. He was really, really smart. And he was a headhunter for Steve Ross, who owned at the time Ashley Famous Agency that became IFA and then ICM. And he said to me, I can get you an audition, but that's the best I can do. I can't do any more than that. So I took the audition and I said, I don't really, I just want to work. And he said, well, they won't audition you in theater, only in nightclubs. And I had already done the drunkard at the 13th Street Theater and on the road all over the South. And Barry Manilow was our musical director. And when I came back from the road, I just kept working out with him, and we were starting to put in, songs together. We weren't even like thinking of it as an act. So this agent whom I auditioned for, brings me into his office and opens the Times, and he looks at the Concord and the Nevele and all these places. He says, "This is where we're going to put you to work." And I mean, can you imagine that that this Catskills was advertising in the Times in those days? Anyway, he said, "I want to put you to work here. How many charts, or I forget how exactly he worded it, but it's like I have charts for how many." So I knew two things. I knew what charts were, and I knew I didn't have them. So, and we didn't have cell phones to go outside and, after a meeting and call somebody. So I went to the first payphone I could get to, and I called Barry Manilow and I said, "I need to put an act together really fast." And he said, "No problem. You have so many songs. We'll just form it into an act. And, I'll do the arrangements, but I'm not going to do the orchestrations. I'm going to get someone to do orchestrations for you." So, um, that's how that started. And then I started at Goldman's because in New Jersey, because they said, that's where they start everybody. You can fail out there. And then
I
you come out.
question. Was Barry Manilow super famous at that
Not at
point?
all. No,
Okay.
he did, he was writing jingles. And he was our musical director for The Drunkard. And before he found this studio apartment, and it was like in the East 20s. It wasn't even in the West 20s in Chelsea. I'm sure it was in the East 20s. I had an extra bedroom, but it was really small, and I only had one bathroom, and I was going to offer him my bedroom because he was getting divorced from his wife. And in the meantime, he found this apartment. And I went to a rehearsal there one day. And in the living room, he's sitting with Adrian Arts, Artz, not Adrian Arsht. Adrian Arts, who became Adrian Anderson. I went to college with her. I didn't even know they knew each other. So I'm like, how do you guys know each other? She said, "We've been writing. And would you mind starting your rehearsal late? Because we want to play you a song we just wrote." And Barry sat at the piano and he played "Could It Be Magic" for me. And it was the first time anyone had ever heard it. And it was so beautiful. I almost fell off the chair. I mean, it was like magnificent. And then, subsequent to that, which was a time later when he started working with Bet, then he invited me to Carnegie Hall, um, because she gave him like three or four songs in the middle of her show so that she could change clothes. And that's when he kind of started, and it was just the, kind of the beginning of his career. But his first record was for Clive Davis, for I think it was Bell Records. And his first what they call an acetate, his demo that started him, was not Mandy. It was a song called Amy, and they billed him as Amy, I mean, as Barry and the Barrettes, and he was singing Amy. And up until fairly recently, I had this it wasn't even a real record. It was an acetate, which you probably know more about that than I do, but um, they nixed that song. Then he did Brandy, and they had to nix that, and they had to change it to Mandy, and that was his first big hit. Um, but I sold it to a collector. Somebody I knew, because I didn't know how much it could bring. Um, to give to the money to the Actors Fund before the Entertainment Community Fund, because I thought, God, I've held on to this so long. I got him to sign it. And I said we want to make some money for the Actors Fund, but I should have probably put it in a real auction, but I sold it for like 1,000. No, I'm sorry, not 1,000. She gave 5,000. I mean, and she said, "Is that fair?" I said, "I think it's fair. I mean, look, I could put it in an auction. It could bring 1,000 or could bring 100,000. I don't know, but I don't want to embarrass him. I just want to get something for the Actors Fund." And I thought it was time I parted with it.
Okay. So you you had a very you've had a very long run in cabaret. You still do your
You know,
Jamie Dory and
I
friends. Let's talk
started,
about.
I have to tell you that I started before we even knew the word cabaret. I started and I was a girl singer. There were boy singers and girl singers, and we opened for comics, and most of the comics were men. And I think I was the first girl singer, which was a lot of years later, like 1980, that ever opened for a female comic, which was Joan Rivers. Because if there was a female comic, they would always have a boy singer. I mean, it's such a stupid term, but that's what they called us. And so one day, I'm trying to, oh, I know, I was playing the living room. Um, well, I don't know. I did a lot of different things. And sometimes someone would say something to me from the audience, and I'd say something back, and it would be funny. And after I got divorced in 75, I went to a place called Al and Dick's, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was on 56th off of 7th. I think it's still something, but it's not, it wasn't in those days, it was like a little piano bar. And Phil, oh God, what was his a comedian? There were a couple of people there that I kind of knew but didn't really know. And Phil Foster. And he came over to me after I got up and I sang a straight song. And but because people were, and I told a story, a funny story about my cat. And he came over to me and he said, you should really go with the comedy. You're really good on your feet. And I also did a showcase at Reno Sweeney. And my ex-husband's lawyers, not my ex-husband, but his lawyers came to see me, and they were in the audience, and basically one of them's basically heckling me in a fun way, but they weren't trying to be mean, but whatever they said, it was funny. I mean, I made it funny. And Rupert Hitzik, who was the partner of Alan King at the time, had said to me, you really, really need to go more comedy. There's so many singers, but there are not a lot of funny women. And so at that point, which was maybe 75, little by little, I started to develop comedic songs, parodies, stuff like that.
You know,
And I got
the
out
first
of
one that
being,
the
it's
first one
what?
the first one I think of when I think of you is Gentile on my mind. Uh,
Well, and I was in a cab coming home to West 72nd Street thinking, God, I have all these charts which are useless to me that I spent a fortune on. And I used to sing Gentle on My Mind. And I'm in the cab and Gentle on My Mind is playing, and I have a full orchestration of it. And I don't know how it hit me. It just hit me, Gentiles on My Mind. And I got together with a friend of mine, Jan Shore, who wrote a lot of parodies, and I said I had an idea, and we sat there and we just came up with it in a matter of minutes. And then I decided to write, and Martin Charnin wanted to do it for me and with me, a whole parody of West Side Story called the Upper West Side Story. And it was the Japs against the Shikses, and when you're a Jap, you're a Jap, all this kind of stuff. And we threw Gentiles in my mind into the mix, even though it wasn't from West Side Story. But God, there were so many funny things in it. A Goy Like That. I mean, it was fun. And it was like a whole mini musical. But then Martin got busy and he had to sort of walk away. And so we just sort of made do with what we had and augmented it a little bit. But that's how I got into like the funny stuff of cabaret. And and the way I got into theater was I moved. I finally moved out of my apartment. I was living next door to my ex-husband for years. And I thought, this is enough. I don't really, I got divorced so I didn't have to see him. And now I see him every day. And that was not the plan. So I found this apartment, and in my building lived Jeffrey Richards, who was a press agent, not a producer. and he invited me one night to a one night only at Alice Tully Hall. It was the complete works of William Shakespeare Bridge. It had to be like 1994. And I moved into this building in 91. Um, so anyway, I went to see this. It was so funny, so clever. And I got a call the next day, how'd you like it? And I thought I was just being sent because I'm a good audience member. I like to laugh. I have a loud laugh. I'm not afraid to laugh. Um, and he said, well, how would you like to produce it? And I said, what does that entail? And he said, raising money. And I said, oh, Jeffrey, I'm a performer. I've never raised a dime in my life. I can't even ask my father for money. So so my husband at the time said, why are you saying no without even trying? Why don't you at least try? So I did. And then that put me, kind of on the road to becoming a co-producer. I didn't totally dive into it right away because, it took a while to pay back that show. When it did, it was so great because we got checks every year, but it didn't exactly break even in its off-Broadway run.
Well, what does? So, so I have a question for you. At what point did you start producing the Jamie deRoy and Friends shows and CDs? Because I just assumed, I might be wrong, but I assumed that was a step for you that would take you towards
Well, that was
producing.
before I moved here in it because what had happened was not that it was planned this way, but I did live across the street from Paulson's, which became Steve McGraw's, which
Which
became
became,
Triad.
yes.
So I performed at Paulson's, and at Paulson's was Forbidden Broadway, one of the many shows, but that was their big hit show. Um, and they had a sign on the stage that said Forbidden Broadway. It was like hanging there. And I asked if the sign was going to stay, and they said yes. And I said, okay, then I'm going to call my show Forbidden Broad because I did funny songs, I did parodies. I thought it was the perfect, you know, pun on a pun or,
Works
parody
for
of a
me.
parody. And so I started that. Then I I don't know. I know what it was. I don't know what the year was exactly. I know it. You know what? I do know the year. 89. I went to the Drama League gala, which in those days was in, I think, January, late January, early February. It was always in the winter. And it was not the first time I'd been there. Um, and it was a really, really great event. And I'm sitting at this table and I meet, all the people. It's not like I knew everybody. And this guy says, hi, I'm Dr. Ruben Hoppenstein. And I said, oh, what kind of a doctor are you? And he said, I specialize in pain. And I said, well, I'm Jewish. I have pain. So he said, where's your pain? I said, in my back. So he said, well, here's my card. And by the way, I'm also a producer. And I said, what do you produce? And he said, I'm producing the 25th anniversary of Jacques Brel is alive and well at the Village Gate. And it was all of our friends that were in it. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I've seen that show. I love that show. So anyway, I call him to make an appointment, and this could never happen today. When I called, and he was like on the Lower East Side at Beth Israel down there, he said, I'm going to send you first for an MRI to save you a trip. Nowadays, you'd have to go see the doctor to get the prescription, all that crap. Anyway, I go in and he looks at my MRI and he says, you know what, it's nothing serious at all. And he leaves. And a second later, he comes back. He said, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And he puts his hand on my throat. And he said, how long have you had this? And I said, what? And he said, "This bump, you never felt this lump?" And I go, "No, and neither did anybody else, because nobody's called my attention to it. Nobody said, have it checked out." He said, "Well, you're going to have it checked out now." And it turns out I had a thyroid tumor. But because I sang, I was afraid to have it out. And so, in the course of, many, many biopsies over many, many years, in that was in 89. By the middle of that year, I was like thinking, well, if I lost my voice, what could I still do that I could still, not maybe perform, but at least present performers, which I used to do at my birthday parties. I would not have, five people, but I'd have, two or three people get up and do something. And that became Jamie deRoy and Friends. So literally 35 years ago, the end of January, I started Jamie deRoy and Friends at Steve McGraw's. And they had converted at that point and remodeled from
Just
Paulson
as a reminder, that was
to us.
Paulson's. Now it was Steve McGraw's.
It just became Steve McGraw's. They, remember they knocked a wall, I mean, a floor out above them so they could make the balcony and make it more of a theater. And that's when then they started, like, with Forever Plaid and stuff like that. And Showing Off was their big another big review they had. So when I started with Jamie deRoy and Friends, I put it was later we put Forever Plaid on, but we put Showing Off on, and it was like I want to say Dennis Markell and uh Doug Bernstein's. It was their review, and Donna Murphy was in it, and Vianne Cox, maybe Jason Grime. I'm trying to remember. I mean, but there were like people that really became big that started in that little review. But anyway, I started that 35 years ago.
So that was sort of producing. That was not the money raising part of producing, which which Jeffrey was the one who foisted that on
Right.
you.
I
But
mean, it
but
was
you had
part of
skills. You
it,
had producing skills.
which I never knew. I mean, I just did it. I wasn't even aware that I was producing. But I
That's the
was.
way it sometimes happens.
Yeah. And you have to be so quick on your feet, because you're going to book someone that gets a job, or you're going to book somebody that gets sick, or Steve Allen showed up at the third show we did, and I was like, he had been sending me cassette tapes and music and all these parodies that he was writing. And I don't know how we started this. He was like my pen pal, only he sent me gifts. Um, and so he showed up, and I went over to him before the show started, and he had just sent me Gorillas in the Mist to Strangers in the Night. And I said, we were going to do this, but I'd rather you do it if you'd like. And he said, "Well, what would you like?" And I said, "Well, of course I'd like you to do it." And so he got up on stage, and he did it, and we knew that he was there. And there was Fine and Shapiro up the street on 72nd Street. Barry Mitchell ran up the street. I gave him money, and he bought one of those big salamis that Steve Allen used to call Louisville sluggers, and give them away on his TV show. So we handed one to him at the end of his little song. It was great fun.
It sounds terrific. I'm sorry I missed it. I don't think I could have possibly seen all of the Jamie DeRoy and Friends incarnations. How many have you done? I mean, they've
I
been
never, I never really,
countless.
I
They're
haven't really
countless.
counted. There were more in the early days. I have to say there were way more of them. I mean, I don't know how I did it, but I did one every week at Steve McGraw's every week.
It's like me. I do these every week. I don't know
And
how I
now
do
I
it.
do it like, once or twice a year. And like when I started with my TV show, we did that every week. I don't think I could do that every week anymore. We're every other week, and as it is, I go crazy. But we've expanded it too, so it just makes it a little harder.
When did you start doing recordings that were the Jamie DeRoy and Friend recordings?
I
This comes under the heading of the balancing act of balancing so many different careers.
It might, it might have been in 2000, I want to say, because, or before that, because I believe, and I'd have to look at at the little sticker on my first album, but I started to get the idea that Jamie DeRoy and Friends could almost be a franchise. And it could have almost been, but it just never was. The and I thought, why don't we make CDs, but not just, I don't want my CD. I want it to be all my friends like we have on the shows. So the first one was we had themes, the child in me one and the child in me two.
I
And
remember that.
the first album that I produced won the Mac Awards for Album of the Year, which
I
was,
know you beat me.
really,
I was
really.
nominated that year. Yeah, you beat me.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But anyway, so yeah, that started like I guess about almost almost 10 years later. Um, but it was sort of almost like a natural offshoot of what we were doing. And when when we were doing it, when I was really actively in the studios, it was really great fun. And I'd never produced an album in my life. And, I had a lot to learn to do that too. Um, I wasn't the engineer or the actual producer, who's running the controls.
No,
Uh,
the engineer is separate. I mean, I've produced three. You've produced like dozens, but I produced three CDs. Actually, one of my favorite things to do. I think that it's one of the few areas of show business where you actually have a lot of control. You don't have control in anywhere else, but in that studio, you can make things happen exactly as you want them to happen. That's been my experience, at least.
yeah.
So
Well, I remember when eventually we did one called this it was a singer-songwriters album, and we didn't start off with the title, but the title became If I Sing, because Maltby and Shire did their song about their father, and that became our title song. But everybody that I had on it was a singer-songwriter, and they had to perform their own song. And I was like, I've only written a couple songs, but I guess I better do one of my own. So I did one, which was, and we did call an album. We called my little, it'll come to me. I'm getting so old that my memory is going, but Wish on the Moon, which was, one of the first songs that I co-wrote with Barry Kleinbord and with Shelley Markham, about going, when you're a kid, wanting to grow up. And then when you grow up and have children, then all you want to do is like, go back to being a kid. And, now it's the child's turn about wanting to, be an adult. Um, but anyway, I sat in the control room. Stephen Schwartz, he recorded For Good. And I always loved that song. And, we're listening to it over and over and over again. And when he came into the booth, I said to him, don't take this the wrong way, but this song, just taking out the little couple of bars about the fight they had, would be the perfect song for a memorial service. And when my mother died, I sang it at her memorial, and it made me cry. And when I went to see Wicked the movie, it was like, well, it's got to have another part because they didn't do For Good yet. And that is such a beautiful song.
of course. So my one of my subtexts, one of my agendas is to talk about how you have a creative life and how you do so many different things and what do you like to let's move into producing. I understand that Jeffrey Richards got you into producing in the first place, and you'll someday forgive him for it. And let's talk about Janie, you are the most prolific producer I've ever met. You have been on 90 Broadway shows, or more than that, and like 60 or more off-Broadway shows. How do you do it? How do you divide your time? How do you find the joy? Where does the joy come from for you?
Um, well, the joy is really, I think, in seeing the finished product. It's not in the raising of the money. I don't particularly find a lot of joy in that. Um, but there
But you
is
can do, but
joy
you
when
can do it. So pat yourself on the back for that because you do it.
things. But I mean, the joy, of course, is when, especially when you put somebody into something, that is one, it's successful in this artistically. And the second way too is, financially. Now, I've had many, many artistic successes that are not financial successes. Um, Luckily, most of my investors, everybody goes into this knowing that, you could lose your money. But most people are very proud to be involved with something that's good art. And I once had somebody that broke even on a project, and it was a beautiful project. It was the revival of Three Tall Women, and they broke even, and she wasn't happy because she didn't make money. And I'm like, well, in this business, breaking even is a win. And she said, "Well, I'm used to making money." And I said, "Well, then maybe investing in Broadway is not for you because you can't think like I can't think like that. And I don't think an investor should think like that. I mean, it's great when you make money. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I tried like hell to get into Hamilton. I just knew that that was going to be, a hit. I don't care how little a piece I could have gotten, I would have taken it, but I couldn't get it. But I mean, that was, great art and it made money. I mean, that's the ideal situation. But I mean, you have to be willing to write a check and to lose it. And that's why they make you sign all these things that you're an accredited investor because they don't want somebody putting $25,000 into a Broadway or off-Broadway show. And if they lose it, that's their whole, livelihood that now they can't pay their rent. You can't invest in theater unless have, you know, certain qualifications that are not artistic. They're financial in case you do write a check and in case you do lose it.
Well, and we're going to talk about accredited investors at the workshop on what is it, January 25th. We're going to be doing raising money for theater, so we're going to be talking about some of those details. So let me ask you this: how how much time in your life do you spend producing? Which in your case is, let me ask you another question. Have you ever lead produced anything? Have you ever produced a developmental work or
No,
shepherded
I mean,
something?
I started to help with which was a beautiful musical written by Joseph Thalken and Barry Kleinborg, based on the book by um, uh, what's his name, Ryman, and it was done. Act one was done at Lincoln Center, in a reading, and Tina Landau directed it, and they loved it at that point, and they said, "Go back and finish writing it, and then we'll present it again." But by the time they presented it again, they had already presented on their stage "Thou Shalt Not," and it didn't make it. And so they looked at was and said, it's too serious, and we're not going to go forward. And I
Thou
just
shalt not, thou shalt not. Was that the Susan Schumann all dance show?
no,
No. What
no,
is?
the all dance was Contact.
Oh, no, there was another one though. Contact
No,
was.
this was, I think,
What was Thou shalt not?
I
Because it's
think
not ringing a bell for me.
I want to say Norbert Leo Butz was in it. Was Harry Connick Jr. involved in it? it's all kind of a blur to me. Um, I'd have to like, look it up on the internet. Um, but anyway, they decided against it, against doing was to finish it. But I wasn't told this until after the presentation. Had I known that before the presentation, I would have like tried to get every producer I knew to come to that event. I wasn't really given the title at that point of producer, but when they were going to walk away with it, I was ready to take up the reins, but it's just, and I still would do it. I mean, we did a reading of it. It was great. Ted Shen and I'd still like to see it happen. But we'll see what happens. But in answer to the question, no, because I feel one, I don't really know if I am totally qualified. Number two, I don't
Hey, that
really,
never stops people.
well, I know, but also, it's a very big responsibility. I mean, I'm not saying that I couldn't put a team together, whether it's the right team, I don't know, but who knows ever what the right team is, until you do it. It doesn't matter that, this team from before did this successful show. They do this show is not so successful. I mean, that happened in London with Marguerite. They had the writers from Les Mis. They had Jonathan Kent writing the book. We nobody thought that could fail, but it did. I always tell anybody in this business, there are no sure bets. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I want to invest in this. It's a no-brainer." And I said, "Well, get that term out of your head because there is no such thing because everything has a chance of failing. Even the year that Book of Mormon, which I have a very small investment in, and that was against Catch Me If You Can, and it might have even been was that also Caroline or Change? I'm not sure, but I know it was Catch Me. Um, it timing is everything. Maybe if Book of Mormon had opened sooner, maybe they would have done differently than when they did open. Who knows? Um, but luckily, it was this huge hit. Not luckily for Catch Me If You Can. And I thought Catch Me If You Can was a wonderful musical. And I there's so much of the score that I just adore. Um, and I just thought everybody in it was terrific. So, I just don't think there is anything that is like, oh, this is it. This is going to win.
Well, yes, we're always advised to let people know that they can't ever involve an investor by suggesting that they're going to make money. We know that. I think we all know better. Some of the investors apparently don't know better. Like the lady that you described, it's like you broke even. You broke even.
Well, I mean, it was explained to her, but whatever. I mean, in that production, they had something happen that the mirrors all fell, and that had to be very expensive. And I think they had to replace somebody on the team, and I don't know, set designer. I don't know what it was, but when you replace somebody, you have to pay them, and so you're paying two people, and it adds to costs. So, um, and these are things that are you can't predict. That's why people like to have a cushion, and they want to have a reserve in case something happens with the set, in case something happens, God forbid, with sickness. With Gypsy, we just lost 7 performances in the busiest time of the year. That is tough. Hopefully we'll, eventually make it up. But it takes a while then to make it up. So whatever. I mean, it's a beautiful production, and we hope that everybody stays healthy, because it wasn't just one actor, it was a lot of actors.
Well, I want to ask you something else and that before I move to the room, because we're going to try to get quick questions from the room. Um, now I forget what I was going to ask you. Oh my God, I'm so
Welcome to
old.
my club.
I know, I'm so old. Um, oh, I was going to ask you about producing. It's gone. It's
Well,
gone.
you asked me about lead producing. I feel that I'm a little too scattered because I have the TV show, I have all these things happening, and I would not want to take on something like a lead producer does, and because I would want to give it my all, and I have too many things happening to make that happen. As it is, it's hard enough, and I'm not lead producing, so um that's sort of why I haven't really done that. But and maybe eventually I will. Of course, eventually I'm getting up there. So eventually is not that long away. Um, it's like getting married now to death do us part. That doesn't look so bad. Not like it's so long.
Oh, good Lord. Well, uh, Owen, I wanted to ask you whether there were any questions in the room, any comments or anything. I do know Ellen Orchid just solved the mystery for me. Thou shalt not. I now remember what it is. The musical by Harry Connick, based on
That's what I
Zola's novel
thought.
Teresa Racan. Yeah, I
I have
remember
not
that
seen
now.
any comments or questions.
So, guys, feel free to put your comments or questions. You can do a virtual hand raise or whatever whatever you want to get us to see that you want to make a comment or ask a question. Um, I was so ready to ask you this other question, and I just can't remember what it was. It was about producing because I really my interest in having this conversation with you is to talk about. Oh, I know what it was. No, I got it. I got it. You talked about Jeffrey Richards got you into producing. A lot of people I know, believe it or not, a lot of people feel that they can't approach shows as investors. They don't know how to ask whether they can invest in something. So, did you ever go through a period where you wanted to invest in something, but you didn't know how to get there, how to get on the team?
Invest in something or co-produce something, because
Well,
there's a
it could
difference.
be it could be either.
Well, I mean, I've had, people say to other friends of mine, somebody will say, oh, I just invested with my friend Jamie in Gypsy, and they go, Gypsy, oh my God, I would love to invest in that. And then that friend calls me, and sometimes it happens that way. I don't think anybody should be particularly shy that, if they don't want you, they'll say no. I mean, especially they're going to more not want you more likely as a co-producer than as a I, almost everyone will take an investor. um but I do think that
No, I've been told by people that they couldn't get near certain shows that they wanted to invest and they couldn't get the producers here.
well, sometimes that happened. I mean, look, everybody and their mother wanted into to Hamilton. It was very difficult, and I didn't do it. I didn't get it. I was stupid though because I had arranged some money to be given to the public theater when it was downtown. And I should have said to the public, I would like a little piece on Broadway. We gave you a donation. It never occurred to me. Never. And that was probably one of my biggest mistakes. Um, and, much bigger than, maybe co-producing, something that didn't make money. I mean, way bigger than that. Um, because I should have, I should have just, taken the initiative and let them say no.
So
If they
let's
say no, they say no, but at least I asked.
so let's talk about the initiative. So what percentage, what not you don't have to be exact about it, but how many shows have you been involved in that you approached them and said I want to do this, and how many is it more often that people come to you and say, Jamie, you want to come on this show? Which
Well, more
happens more?
often it's they come to me. But um The only one off the top of my head was I really wanted to be a co-producer on Hello Dolly. And at the time, Scott Rudin was like teaming everything in, in pairs. Um, and I had a relationship in the early days of with Bet. Um, I mean, I went to see Bet. She was in Fiddler, but she was doing a nightclub called Hilly's, which had been Trudy Heller's. What it is now, I just remember it being on that kind of corner. But she was performing there, and I think that's where that it was, or if it was, but it was in that area of the West Village, and she was brilliant. Um, and
It wasn't the Continental Baths.
No, no, no. The Continental Bass was up
Only,
and I went there to see
only
her, but this
teasing.
was way before that. She was
Okay.
singing I Love a Piano, and she was all over that piano. It was so funny. I mean, it was brilliant. It was just totally brilliant. Um, but anyway, I mean,
So the piano had a Me Too moment.
yeah.
Okay.
But I just there haven't been that many things that I wanted to get into that I couldn't. But so the Hello Dolly, he said he wouldn't give it to me on its own.
Right.
And so I did invest in it. But I
What
had
did it pair it with? It wasn't with the Titus Andronicus. It was something else, something odd.
no,
It was
because I did that after, and I did the irony is he wouldn't give it to me for Hello Dolly, but then right after that, I did the next four of his shows without him. Well, they were two pairs. One was Gary, which was what you're referring to. The four shows were Gary, Waverly Gallery, Three Tall Women, and something else. And it wasn't Hello Dolly. Hello Dolly was right before that. I didn't get Hello Dolly except as an investor. And I really wanted it. Plus, I'd been in the movie. Um,
Oh, I
so
didn't
there
know
were a
that.
zillion reasons that I wanted to be on Hello Dolly. Yeah, I was in the movie version.
Have you ever invested in a show and it changed by the time you saw it? It was so different than what you thought you had invested in. Does that ever happen?
Well, I never saw China Doll. I just, went to the invited dress. We all kind of went on the two things. It was David Mamet and it was Nathan and not and it was Al Pacino. So it was just a surprise because, it just didn't feel like a real play because it seemed like like a one person, whatever. I don't know. It just it was disappointing. And
But
even
didn't it do decently because of
it
Pacino?
made money. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the irony. That one made money. Um, but I went with primary stages. I co-produce a lot with them. And sometimes you read something, and I remember reading Indian Blood. And when I read it, which is, by the way, a reason that I think a lot of people don't want to send investors a script because sometimes a script is very hard to process and so when I read Indian Blood, I was like, I don't get it at all. But I loved Pete Gurney. I loved his writing. I loved him as a person. I loved primary stages. So I said, I'm going to do it. I went to the invited dress. They didn't even use props ever. I mean, not it wasn't just, oh, they didn't have props at the invited dress. The whole conceit of the show was no props. It was so brilliant. And when I read it, I would never have known that. Now, the one script that I did read that I thought was hysterical and did not disappoint was the motherfucker with the hat. And Stephen, I think is just a wonderful writer, and he really knows how to deal with language and having characters, you know, verbalize things. And it was great, and it was so funny. Um, but I'm trying to think of off the top of my head of what would have changed drastically. Um, and off the top of my head, I can't exactly. But you know, without mentioning any names, and it's not something I was ever involved with, that I would go to some readings of a certain musical, and you know, after I saw it once, then you get invited sometime later, and you think it's going to be better, but it wasn't. And then you finally see the finished product, and it still didn't achieve what I know they had hoped to achieve. But it's again, it wasn't something I was involved with, so it's a little bit different.
Well, we have a few questions in chat now. So, Owen, do you want to bring the
Sure.
questions
First
into?
question from Alan Stewart. What do you look for in a play when you opt to produce it, and what do you see as the taste or upcoming trends in theater?
I I mean, the trends have been, you know, stars in a show, and they sell, but they sell for, you know, a limited amount of time. It's not, I mean, like I did the play that goes wrong, and who would have ever thought that that would have had the kind of longevity, but it didn't have a star ever. It just had really good actors. And then when they moved off Broadway, you know, well, they even on Broadway, they replaced actors with Americans, but now it's off Broadway, and I went back to see it not that long ago. It's still hysterical, and the fact that it's still running and still bringing in audiences, I just think it's really great. I mean, you know, you sometimes look at something like I wasn't a producer on Forever Plaid. If I was ever going to get in those days about being a producer, that would have been it. One of the things that I would have jumped on. I went to see it at Steve McGraw's with Peter Riegert and Bruce McGill, and we sat there saying, "This is so funny, so clever. You don't need stars, just four guys that can sing and harmonize." But you know, we didn't end up getting involved in it, but we went to see it a lot. Um,
It did well by Stuart Ross.
Yeah, I mean but it was so good.
Yeah.
But anyway, there is no one certain thing that I look for, because you know, there's things that I do that are comedic and things that I do that are terribly serious. Um, and I just, you know, there were the last thing at primary stages with Kate Hamill, with The Light and the Dark, was so far removed from anything else that Kate Hamill had done, and I had done several of her shows beforehand, and they were all funny. This was not funny. This was very serious. And so you know, I can't put my finger on something saying, oh well, it has to speak to me, you know, it's got to, you know, speak to women's rights. I don't get pigeonholed like that in any of the things that I do.
Well, we can Owen, move us to the next question, which is sort of almost a follow-up.
Yeah, follow up to that. What is your favorite way to learn about new opportunities slash shows?
My favorite way is to see it in a reading, because I just think that actors can bring so much to a script that um you know, you can't even take it into account. It's so different from reading a script. um it's always going to be better live in front of you, even without props, with even whether they're reading scripts, it doesn't matter. It just to hear it and see it, you know, there's something that's just running now at the St. Clemens Theater, not one of my favorite theaters, is probably my least favorite theater. It's off Broadway. It's called Pen Pals. And I saw it with Catherine Curtin and Sharon Lawrence. Now, Sharon had written me about it, and then the press agent had written me about it. And I thought, well, it was the end of the year. So I went to see it, and I took some friends. I did not know what to expect. It's a little bit like love letters, except it's not a romantic thing. It's about pen pals, and these two women start when they were in high school, and they carry on a writing relationship, which we have certainly forgotten how to write a letter. And and you know how long you had to wait between letters? Well, she was in America and she's in England. So you can imagine how long the waits were between letters. But it was so charming. And the two of them brought so much to each role that I was really blown away by it. Um, and I really and because it's read like they did in love letters, you can keep replacing people, which is a great thing when, an actress wants to, do something but can't commit for very long.
So it's good for it's a good star vehicle. They can bring
Yeah,
stars in.
yeah,
Um, let me just ask you, do you have a little bit more time? Because we have other questions, but I don't. I want to
yeah.
respect your
I,
time.
I'm fine.
Okay. Next up, Owen.
This is a question from Catherine Keats, asking Catherine, you may want to jump on mic to ask yourself just to make sure that it's exactly what you want to be asked.
Um, I asked, uh, what, I'm not even sure if it's an
Oh,
appropriate thing to ask. I
oh,
asked, I
I
don't
think I
know.
know. I think I know what your question is.
Great, you asked.
You want to
Cool.
know how does the producer set the amount, the minimal amount for
An
an
investment.
investment.
Yeah.
So
Well, the lead producers usually set that. I don't say, oh, I'm gonna ask $50,000 of somebody. I hate to ask that. But if the lead producers say that's what a unit is, but then you can say to them, well, do you allow half units? Um, you know, when I first started, and again, it was off-Broadway, and it was 94. We opened at the beginning of 95. Um, it was like $10,000. And I went to Jeffrey Richards and I had a bunch of $10,000 investors. But there were some people that said, I'd like to do it, but I can only do 5,000. So he said to me, you can take the 5,000 under you, meaning me. So he said, so you can take as many $5,000 investors as you want, but the unit is going to go, we're going to pay you and you pay your investors. It's more complicated. Um,
well, that's complicated enough, but yes, I'm sure it is.
yeah, because you're dealing then with, with K1s and, whatnot. But that was what they asked me to do.
So, Catherine, for instance, if you're thinking about investing in a show, when you approach a producer, or if a producer approaches you, they will tell you what the minimum investment is. So, and if you
I
don't have
guess my
that,
question is it a percentage? Is it a percentage of the entire budget?
yes,
That's
it
what,
is. It's
okay,
essentially it
thanks.
boils down to that, but it doesn't wind up being an odd number. Basically, they take the entire budget and they divide it into what looks like reasonable units. A 50,000. You're not going to have a $23,000 or a
Got it.
21,000. It's good. It's usually 25. It's 50.
Right.
Whatever the math winds up being for it to add up to the total budget.
Got it.
But
Mhm.
it's usually priced in a way that just seems um, a natural amount for a unit.
But
Cool.
also they have mini and maxi, so the percentage is it's not exactly on a percentage. You might get, once everything is done and all the money is in, then they'll send you a thing that your investment represents this percentage of the capitalization, but you don't go into it necessarily thinking that. Basically, what people now ask is what is a unit? And it used to be more 25,000. It's getting to be more common, 25 and 50. Um, I heard Hell's Kitchen was higher than that. So everybody has a different thing. And you know, uh they they don't like to have well, when they can, they like to limit how many investors because of the filing with the SEC and all that,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it rarely happens.
Cool. Thank you.
Where are we now, Owen?
I think that's it. There's a uh, quote from Jeffrey Sweet that was mentioned, but I think that's all for questions that I
The,
see.
the ultimate test of a script is not how well it reads, but how well it plays. And there is no necessary correlation between the two. Jeffrey Sweet.
Well, I agree with him
I think we all agree with him here.
because, I could read a script and not get it at all and then go to see it and you go, boy, I missed that, totally. That's why I love readings when possible. And even better than, sometimes they go, well, we can get you an archival. But even then, it doesn't always translate very well because it's so one-dimensional. And Jeffrey Sweet, and I wasn't involved with primary stages then, but Jeffrey Sweet, way back in the day, wrote with Melissa Manchester a wonderful little show that they did at primary stages original theater on 45th Street, which is now it became uh like was that the Puerto Rican? I don't know if that was the Puerto
Traveling,
but it
traveling
was, but
theater.
it did become the Davenport, and now it's the
Oh no,
AM.
yeah, that wasn't the Puerto Rican traveling,
Okay, we did
whatever.
Forbidden Broadway, I think, at both of those theaters, but I mean, and I think I'm the only one to be involved with a Forbidden Broadway, maybe not the only one, but that I love that show so much. But I got involved with one or two in Forbidden Broadways, but we didn't make money, but I still loved it. I miss it. I think they were always so much fun.
Well, I think Eric is probably licking his wounds right now because he just produced one at his theater and it didn't run and
And it
nobody.
was
I have
terrific.
no idea why.
I don't either, but it was terrific.
I um so I'm gonna wind up now. If you can stay, people might want to meet you. It's up to you. If you have to go to dinner or something, that's fine. But I'm going to basically take you off spotlight, and I'm going to do my final words to my audience out there. First of all, thank you, Jamie, so much. I've known you for a long time, and this is the most time we've ever spent together. So I'm very grateful for that. I loved
It had to
spending
be
time with
on
you.
screen.
Yes. Well, I just I enjoy you so much. So thank you for doing this. It was great for me. I hope it was as good for you as it was for me. But
I
it
thought you'd
was
never say that. Uh,
okay. So I want to thank everybody in the room. I mean, we have a steady audience that comes in every week, and some of you have come in almost every week. You're amazing. I thank you so much. I'm honored that you spend time with me and TRU on Fridays. And I think in the new year, I hope I bring in a lot of people and subjects that are interest to you and are inspiring. Hopefully, I think there were moments that were inspiring with Jamie. Jamie's a wonderful speaker. Um,
Thank you.
Wonderful guest, Jamie. Thank you. So the thing I have to say to you out there in YouTube land and podcast land, if you want to be in the room and you want to be able to ask questions and be part of the conversation, uh, I can make that happen. Just email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com, and we'll put you on the Zoom list and we'll invite you every week. We'll keep you posted on who's coming in week after week. Um, Next week, I've got the something very different, very different. We've got the Farm Arts Collective coming in. It's a company that combines community and theater and farming and agriculture, um, all in one great big, I don't know, one big collective, I guess. So they're going to talk about what they do and how they do it, and they have opportunities for writers. They're always looking for writers. So some of you might be interested in that. And we've been doing this for 4 years, and first couple years it was free because it was a community service. Well, it's still a community service, and it still can be free. But if you want to give us a little help, um, we would appreciate it. I have to say that we ended 2024 spectacularly. I mean, we got a $25,000 grant from NISCA. We've got a $10,000 grant from the Montage Foundation, and we made $20 or $30,000 at our benefit. That doesn't mean that takes care of all of our expenses. There are programs that we want to do this year. We want to do a musicals reading series where we have more than one musical. We want to do a True Speak evening of short plays about current social issues. Takes money. So if you want to help us pay some of the bills and bring back some of the programs that we would like to bring back, go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com, and give us a donation or join as a member. Joining as a member is very, very helpful. And that's it. See you in the weeks to come, and Happy New Year. And let's all have a healthy, successful, prosperous 2025. And in spite of some challenges, let's get through it, and let's get through it elegantly and proudly and successfully. That's it, guys. See you next week.